We have previously discussed looking at a sine and a cosine function and identifying the amplitude, the phase shift, the period, the x scale, and the vertical transformations. Today we're going to do all of that again, but we are going to eliminate phase shift. We're going to come back to that with sine and cosine functions on Thursday and Friday. Please do me a favor. Let's write down example number 1 together. H of x equals -3 sine of x minus 5. Now off to the side, I want you to make a very small unit circle. And let's identify the points that would be at 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270, and 360. Now each one of those has a coordinate. It has an x coordinate and a y coordinate, and they are very easy to identify. Remember that when we look at the coordinates, we always place the cosine first and the sine second. So I'm going to make areas where I will identify the cosine and the sine. And then over to the side here, just because some of you may have forgotten, it's always cosine first and sine second. Well, how do we achieve the cosine and the sine for each of these 4 areas? We'll start at the origin. I move to the right one, and then I don't go up or down. And that's how I achieve the ordered pair 1, 0. To come up to 90 degrees from the origin, I'm not going left and I'm not going right, so 0, and then I go up 1. To get here to the left-hand side, I'm going to shift 1 unit to the left and I don't go up or down. And lastly, to go down here to 270 degrees or 3 pi over 2, I'm not going to go left or right, I just go down 1. So let's do a quick review of sine and cosine on the same graph before I attempt to graph this one. Both sine and cosine have 4 steps, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So one cycle can be shown in 4 steps. I'm going to use 2 different colors, and hopefully they will show up. I'm going to start here with doing the sine function. So I'm going to write y equals the sine of theta, or sine of x. And how can I use the unit circle to graph this? Well, this is always our starting point. So right here, I'm going to start at my starting point, the origin. Now sine is the second value. So what is the output? The output here is 0. So on the y-axis, I go to 0. That's my starting point. Okay, now watch. To get to step 1, I rotate up to step 1, and now I'm at step 1. What's the output value? 1. So I go up to 1. Then I rotate to step 2. What's the output value? 0. So step 2 is 0. Then I rotate to step 3. The output value is -1. And I finalize one cycle of this sine curve with an output value of 0. So for sine, just remember, if we think about land formations, we have a hill, and that's followed by a valley. On the same graph, we're now going to graph cosine. So y equals the cosine of theta. So we're going to start in the same position, and I'm going to go one cycle around the unit circle. Remember that cosine values are the first value, so I'm starting here. What is the output value at this initial location? 1. So on the unit circle, on my graph, I'm going to go to an output value of 1. Then I go to the first step, and the output value for sine, the second number, what did I just do here? I'm so sorry here. I'm doing cosine, so the output value is 1. Here's my first step, and the output value at my first step is 0. This is my second step, and the output value is -1. My third step, and if you're wondering how, this is start, 1, 2, 3. My third step has an output value of 0. This is my fourth step, and the output value is 1. This looks like a really sharp V, so I can understand how you may think that. But remember, this is an ongoing wave curve. So it comes down, makes a U shape, and then it comes back up again. The cosine is thought of as starting at the top of the hill, going to the bottom of the valley, and back up to the top of the hill. That's one cycle. So let's get started here. Let's get started. I want everybody to make yourself a very simple graph. And this is what we're going to practice graphing. Okay, so to practice graphing this, I want us to start right now. Okay, I want us to start right now by asking ourselves, is there a vertical transformation? That means, do I need to shift this thing up or down? And the answer is yes. Whatever number is hanging out in back is going to tell us where we're going to shift it. Because it's a -5, I want to go from the origin, I want to go down 5. And then I'm going to make this dotted line. This is now my new horizontal, axis. Okay, we've got that done. Some people like to cross it off. There's no problems with that. Okay, and now we're going to make 4 lines because there's 4 steps with cosine, just like 4 steps with sine. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next, because I'm working with the sine function, I normally go hill and then valley. That's what I normally do. So it normally looks like this: hill and then valley. Why do I not go hill and then valley for this particular function? There's a reason. What's the reason? The negative. So instead I start here, but instead of going up 3 on step 1, I'm going to drop down 3. 1, 2, 3. So step 1, I drop down 3 from the new midline, that new horizontal axis. Step 2, I come back to the midline. Step 3, I go up 3. And step 4, back to the midline. So it's looking just like this. That is one cycle of this function. One cycle of this function. So what is the length of this function? Well, both sine and cosine. We're going to go back up here. We're going to look what's directly in front of the x. In this case, it's a 1. Well, 2 pi divided by 1 is simply 2 pi. That means this distance is 2 pi. From the start of the cycle to the end of one cycle. And now this is called the x scale. It means the distance horizontally from one step to the next. So how do we determine that? We take whatever this is and we divide it by 4. Well, 2 pi divided by 4 reduces to 1 pi over 2. All of that is going to be stuff we reviewed. Now today we're adding a new piece to this. I want you on your graph to put a little star next to that high point. And I'm going to demonstrate how we can come up with an ordered pair for this particular point. Okay, the first thing is we're going to figure out the x. How many steps do I need to take horizontally to get to this piece? 1, 2, 3. So off the side, I'm going to take 3 times whatever the x scale is. 3 times whatever the x scale is. 3 times 1 is 3. So I have 3 pi over 2. Can't be reduced. From the origin, if I go to the right 3 pi over 2, I'd be right here. Now I need to figure out how many do I need to drop down. Well, I dropped down, notice I dropped down 5 to get to this line, but then I went up 3 for the amplitude. So if I drop down 5 and then I go up 3, what would this be at? It appears it would be at a value of -2. So the first question I ask you is, how many steps have I taken horizontally to get there? Anybody? How many steps? 1 step. So 1 times an x scale of 1 pi over 2 simply gives you what? 1 pi over 2. That is the x value to get here. It's 1 step to the right. Now I need to count down, how do I get down here? Well, I had to drop down 5. I dropped down 5. And then the amplitude was 3. I dropped down 3 more. 5 and 3 gives us -8. All right, here we go. So, which way is the first way I'm shifting this? Am I shifting it up, down, left, or right? Up. Nice job. So everybody's going to go up 3. 1, 2, 3. Up 3. Okay, next steps. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Now, if you are somebody who gets easily confused by this, come up here and cross that out. We are going to have a cosine function. So what's going to be the general picture? Hill, valley, hill. How do I know if I start up top or if this is going to flip directions and go valley, hill, valley? What determines that? What determines that about this equation? Anybody? It's whether this value is positive or negative. If it's positive, I'm starting up top first of all. Now, how high am I starting? From this point, I'm going to go up 2. So from here, everybody goes up 2. There's going to be 4 steps. There are my 4 steps. Notice this is cosine and not sine. So step 1 is after I leave this. So step 1 is going to be at the midline. Step 2 is dropping down 2. Step 3 is back to the midline. And step 4 is 2 above. Remember, this doesn't make a V. It makes a nice hill, valley, hill. Turn to your partner, knowing that you do have an actual test of this in this next week. What is the period length for this particular function? Ready, get set, go. What is the period length? How do we get an answer of 1? We take 2 pi, whether it's sine or cosine, and we divide by whatever is in front of the x. 2 pi divided by 2 pi is simply 1. That means this length is 1. What does that make every x scale? That means the distance horizontally from one step to the next. You take whatever this period length is and you always divide it by 4 because there's 4 steps. That means each one of these is going to be 1/4 from one step to the next. Here's the one I want you to determine. Please determine this for me right now. I'm going to press pause. You have 1 minute to come up with the coordinates of this point. Ready, get set, and go. Let's figure out how to come up with this ordered pair. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm 4 steps over. Now, what is the x scale? The x scale is 1/4. So I take 4 steps over, take it times the x scale, and I get 4 over 4, which is 1. This is 1. It's the exact length of one cycle. How much am I going up? Well, I had to go up 3 plus an additional 2. So in this particular problem, let's go through this very quickly in less than a minute. On this problem, I'm going to start up by going 2 above. So 1, 2, and going all the way across. Now, a general sine curve goes hill and then valley, but this one is negative. So instead of going hill and then valley, I'm going to reverse it and go down first and then up. Down first and then up. Now, how far do we go down? Half of 3 is 1.5. So I'm going to start right here at 2 above, and I have 4 steps. My first step is down 1.5, then back to the midline, then up 1.5, and then back to the midline. So it's looking like this. Okay, here's my question for you. In terms of decimals, what is this ordered pair? Go. What is here as we go through this? How do I find this ordered pair? Notice that I have not identified the length of this period or cycle. So I'm going to take 2 pi and I'm going to divide it by whatever's in front of the x. 2 pi divided by pi is simply 2. This distance is 2. So the x scale is 2 divided by 4 because there's 4 equal steps, which is 1/2. Each of these is 1/2. How many steps have I gone from the beginning to get over here? How many steps? 3. 3 times the x scale of 1/2 gives me an ordered pair right here of 3 halves. This is 3 halves. Now, this is the tricky part. How high have I gone? Well, I already shifted up 2, and then I went up an additional 3 halves, or 1.5. As a decimal, we could write 3.5, or 7 halves if you like to leave it in fraction form. Thanks for raising your hand. Estras, what's your first goal? What would you do here? I like it. Manny, you have a birthday that already passed. You'll go next. Manny, what would be the next thing you would do? -4. So from here, I'm going to go up 4 and down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Deanna, what would you do next? Okay. I like it. Let's go up here with Karen. Karen, what would you do next? Okay, I like it. So forget about this right now. Whenever you just see cosine, what do you normally have? What do you normally have with cosine? Look at your nose, kiddos. You normally have hill, valley, hill. That's what you normally have. Are you going to have that this time, Karen? Why not? So where do I start? If I'm not going to go hill, valley, hill, then what do I do? So valley, so I start down here. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's my first starting position. I've not done step 1, but that's where I start. Yvette, what would be step 1? So where do I go? This is step 1. Where do I make the dot for step 1? On the midline. That's good. Good job, team. Good. Stepsisters in front. What's my next move? Giselle, what's my next move? So step 2, where do I go? How many up? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good job. Okay, let's go over to cadence. What would I do next? Yeah, back to the midline. Kim, last. Down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so this is a distance of what? I take 2 pi and I divide it by 6 pi. Well, the pi symbols, we think of them as canceling out. They reduce down to 1. And 2 over 6 reduces to 1/3. This is a distance of 1/3. To figure out the x scale, I take 1/3 and I divide it by 4. But that's really confusing. Like, how do I do this? So I want to take 1/3 and I want to divide it by 4, or 4 over 1. When we divide fractions, you keep the first value, turn division into multiplying, and flip the second one. So each one of these is 1/12. With that being said, I want to know what is the coordinates of this. How do I find this? Who's ready to get going? Okay, Jocelyn, your hand went up first. Jocelyn, can you tell me, how do I find the x value for this right now? Shh. Shh. You multiply what by 2? Okay, can you tell me, why did you choose 1 over 12 and why did you choose 2? All of that is correct. Shh. 2 steps over, okay? Yeah, that's your x scale. So 2 over 12 is when you multiply, that reduces to 1 over 6. Okay, great. Let's go over to Maria. Maria, what is the y value here, Maria? Maria, I'm going to help you out. We rotated this, not rotate, excuse me. We transitioned this thing up how much to start with? Close. 3. And then the amplitude was 4. So how high do we go? 7. This is the ordered pair.